I've been thinking about this for a very long time. Probably back to the last World Cup, but certainly in this World Cup, and almost any time someone tweets the line that India are chokers. And the real question I have is, how bad are India? And so I have created an entire series looking at that. I've focused on T20 cricket because I think that's the biggest issue at the moment, but there's a little bit on ODIs here as well. There's no way I can do this in one video, so it'll probably end up being 5 or 6. So if you want to follow the whole series, I suggest subscribing to my channel, pressing the little bell icon, following me around the supermarket, whatever you need to do. But let's start here. India have not won a major final since MS Dhoni did this. And they have not won an ICC event at all since Ishant Sharma did this. That was in 2011 and 2013. It's not a lifetime ago, but I can see why to some people it kind of feels that way. And that's because if you look at the median age of a person in India, it's just under 29. So that means that half the country saw their team win the World T20, the World Cup, and the Champions Trophy in their childhood years. And since then, they've seen failure. It means there is an entirely different generation of Indian cricket fans right now. Their parents and grandparents can go on about how Australia and the West Indies used to bully them, but politically, financially, and I suppose most crucially on the field, India is the most winning team in the world. I don't really have a political measure, but obviously financial is pretty much the same thing. And when I went looking for valuations of cricket boards, I saw a lot of weird results. One had South Africa ranked 2nd. No. Another one had Australia as 7th. No. But this one is the closest to the order that makes sense, although the Zimbabwe numbers do catch my eyes a little bit here. The one constant was that Indian cricket was regularly valued around $2 billion. I think that is way less than the real number, if we're being honest. But let's roll with that, because either way, the Indian number looks absolutely stupid compared to any other nation. So then we come to the biggest question of any Indian fans right now. How? How did India get here? Because when starting this project, that was the thing that kept coming to my mind. It's such a simple question, but probably not as simple an answer. If you look at all cricket since India won that last ICC event, they are the most successful team in cricket. They are the only side who win more than 2/3 of their games, and it really isn't that close to anyone else. They also play the most games of any international team. And of course, they win the most. You can see that almost all other major teams have won about the same as each other. The gap from India's amount of wins to England's in 2nd place is massive. There is absolutely no way you can look at this Indian team and say they are not the most winningest team in cricket. And yet since India last won an ICC event, Sri Lanka, West Indies, Pakistan, New Zealand, Australia and England have won major men's trophies. Some of those teams have also won major women's trophies. And so you have an entire fan base, the biggest in sporting history, and they're following one team. And these people are young, they're confident, and they're used to their team being very good. And yet every time India gets to a major tournament, it all falls apart. And you'll have heard many reasons. The IPL is the problem. And by IPL, usually what people mean is that the money is the problem. It is weird that they keep dominating between tournaments and have actually made a lot of finals and semi-finals, if that is the case. Like, are they only paid enough to bother them in knockout games? The other is choking. And while they are building a mini South African run, it is certainly a different situation to what we see with South African cricket. In fact, I would say what the biggest difference is that within India's failures, there's a very clear pattern. And for the purposes of this, the World Test Championship final was a one-off and not white ball, and I think we're just going to move that to the side for now. In 2014, India plays Sri Lanka in the final. They bat first and they make 130 while losing only 4 wickets. It's an oddly low total for a team that had so many good batters in it. And no doubt this was a stacked bowling lineup that the Sri Lankans had. Malinga, Harath, Kulasekara, Senanayake. But Angelo Matthews, who pretty much hasn't bowled that much at all since then, delivered 4 overs for 25. Only Kohli scores quicker than a strike rate of 115, which is terrifyingly slow. However, he played a fairly typical Kohli innings of catch-up. After 11 overs, his scoring rate was less than a run a ball, despite having faced almost 50% of the deliveries. In fact, he was batting at the same slow rate as everyone else at that point, and then he breaks free. But he's the only one who can do that, and they end up with a bad score that Sri Lanka chased with 13 balls left. The next one-day international World Cup was in Australia. India made the semi-final in that event. They played Australia, who made 328 without losing many wickets. 2 things are interesting about that chase. The first was the slow start. They didn't lose any wickets, but as is their way, they also didn't put any pressure back on Australia. So when they did start to lose wickets, they fell well behind the run rate. The second was the chase towards the end, as Rahane and Dhoni never really tried to compete with the rate. And the whole thing just kind of fizzled out because they were so far behind. In the 2016 T20 World Cup semi-final, they lost to the West Indies. The innings of Ajinkya Rahane is used in the book Cricket 2.0 as proof of a match-losing innings. India actually made 192 in this match, but you could see from the power play onwards that they were just ticking along. And a lot of that was Rahane, who would end up with 40 from 35 balls. The West Indies chased it down with a couple of balls remaining, and India didn't take enough wickets. In the 2017 Champions Trophy final, they couldn't take wickets against Pakistan. That led to a very high score, and Pakistan's bowlers did take wickets. And that was that. The 2019 ODI World Cup semi-final was a bit odd, partly because it was over 2 days. India was probably the best team on day one of that match. But on day two, they really struggled. They lost early wickets and then they batted very slow. At one stage, they were scoring at 3 runs and over, and they couldn't quite get there in the end. The twist in the T20 World Cup of 2021 was that they didn't make a final at all. Of course, they still lost some pretty important games. In the first match, they made 151 against Pakistan. They lost early wickets, and then they went slow, and Pakistan embarrassed them. Kohli faced 49 balls for his 57 runs. Their bowlers then didn't take any wickets. In the following game, they scored, if that is the right term, 110 runs for 7 against New Zealand. Another game where they lost a combination of wickets while still scoring slow. And that was their whole tournament, really. And this takes them to the semi-final of this World Cup. In this match, England just let India bat, knowing that they wouldn't make a total that would be beyond England's reach. Rohit Sharma's innings wasn't as defensive as it probably looks on paper. He actually played aggressive shots. They just couldn't get really near middling any of them. But they didn't take down England spinners, they didn't use Rishabh Pant to do that, and then they didn't take any wickets. And if you go back, they did play in a similar style earlier in the tournament as well. But there were two interesting things about this latest World Cup. India came into it wanting to be more attacking, and when they got there, they realised that this wasn't that kind of World Cup, so they went back to their original style. The thing is that they were probably absolutely right about that. Conserving wickets and having 3 new ball bowlers in this particular tournament was probably a good idea, even if it happened largely by accident. This was the equal toughest World Cup for batters ever. But there was something else about this World Cup. The pitches were so incredibly varied, partly due to the fact it was early season in Australia, also the fact that Hobart and Perth really shouldn't be in the same country. So that meant that every pitch was completely different. And what you had to do to win this tournament was problem solve as you went on. So having one style wasn't the best way of winning. So when they got to Adelaide, that was the time that they should have gone back to that other more attacking style. They didn't. And as normal, they played the safe, conservative option. And again, they didn't win. And if you're wondering how aggressive they've been between the World Cups with the bat, they were the most high-flying team in T20. They were scoring at almost half a run more and over than England were. Now, England weren't always at full strength. I suppose, though, neither was India. But the Indian side, for the best part of a year, were not far off scoring at 10 runs and over. And they also did it while averaging a huge amount. And here are the people who scored it. The top 4 run scorers were also the top 4 that India had in this World Cup. And the other thing that's really interesting is every single player on this list scored at a strike rate of over 130. This is not a parade of penguins. This is a lineup of leopards. No one averaged under 24 here either. They just straight tonked sides everywhere. And then when they needed it in Adelaide, they got singles. And when you look at it right now, there are clearly 6 teams who are clearly the best in the world at T20. And probably ODIs as well. Of these, only 2 haven't made a T20 World Cup final in the last 2 efforts. South Africa and India. At the moment, South Africa is not that far away from being a feeder league for the IPL. That is not the company India want to be in. This is all the best teams against each other in the last 3 years. It produces some odd results, like what's with New Zealand's ODI record, and Australia in tests I can assume maybe has something to do with them playing a lot at home. But on this, outside of the World Cups, India is the best team in T20s when they play the other best teams. And they were under the old regime, and they continue to be under the new regime. And yet under both, they went home early. Next episode, why? As in, why did this happen to India? If you want to see that episode, like this one, subscribe, press the bell icon. Or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, TikTok, wherever else I am. or you could just come back to this page several times a day, hoping the new episode's here.